Ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored tonight to be here speaking to you.
I am young Cheng Hsun from Taiwan. A path contrary to recovery.
And my topic is last but not least mile. We thought it was the last mile. With U equals U and 1990, we thought it was the last mile to eliminate HIV. Ever since the invention of antiretroviral therapy, ART, Taiwan had been proud of catching up with the world. In 1996, our respected scientist, David Ho, an American-born Taiwanese, introduced a highly active antiretroviral therapy, HART. HART is a 3-combined regimen with 2 MRTI backbones plus 1 potent third agent. This regimen was a game changer that saved lives. And today, we have these potent regimens, each made into a daily single tablet, reimbursed by a National Health Insurance Program for every Taiwanese living with HIV. We have Biktarvy, Triumeq, Odefsey, Destrigo, Juluca, Dovato for first-line use, and Sintusa for the second line. In addition to the advancement of medicine, we had public health policies that lowered HIV incidence. For example, in 2003, we provided harm reduction services, which included stereo needles exchange, methadone, and HIV testing. The surge of HIV outbreak caused by syringe sharing was then controlled. Later on, we lowered the threshold of ART initiation for any CD4 level. We promoted HIV anonymous self-testing and self-testing kits. We promoted same-day ART rapid initiation. And we provided partially subsidized PrEP and PEP for populations at risk. We then successfully lowered the incidence of new HIV acquisition caused by unprotected sex. As a result, Taiwan had been doing well in the care cascade goal. In 2022, we achieved 90-95-95, which was better than the global average. We heard the good news of U equals U, and with the promise of long-acting injective antiretroviral therapy and curative research, we wished to bring an end to the HIV pandemic. We thought this must be the last mile to go. We must speed up. However, it was not the least mile to go. As I became an infectious disease fellow doctor, I began to hear different stories, so different from the perfect statistics we saw. Mr. A refused to take ART. Every time he was sent to the hospital, he forced a smile at me. Before his last breath, he wished if only Evusheld, the long-acting COVID-19 monoclonal antibody, could be available for AIDS patients too. Mr. B took a single tablet ART daily, but he took more than a dozen of psychiatric prescriptions. He was labeled with more than a dozen of psychiatric diagnoses. Meanwhile, Mr. C swallowed a whole bottle of Triumeq we just prescribed. And there are still so many more friends, some on the run, some sent for conversion treatment, torn apart from a devoted relationship. And some friends were even being murdered out there. For my friends, physical health may have been secured by ART, but physical health alone does not lead to happiness. People living with HIV come from marginalized populations. They shared difficulties not only from the disease itself, but also from the stigmatization of their different cultures. Stigma took away from them their stable housing, family, jobs, and social relationship. Stigma refused them of medical facilities and healthcare services. Stigma brought inequity to medical resource distribution and to research funding. These situations were worsened by the criminalization of HIV transmission, drugs, sex work, and sexuality. These situations were also worsened by compulsory substance use treatment and mandatory HIV testing. And there are still more stigma coming from political propaganda, police media, stereotyped education, religion, authoritative government, and the general society. Look at these pictures. Freedom, safety, housing, privacy, relationship, and jobs, and other human rights were lost. Some headlines are still so fresh, so recent, happening in the post-same-sex marriage era here in Taiwan. I do not need to go into the details to show you how much blood and tears were shed in their stories. And look at these pictures. These killings and sufferings have extended to every corner of the world, the HIV response globally. The status quo of Taiwan is as that of the rest of the world is we do have the tools to curb the HIV pandemic. However, our policies are hindering us from utilizing these tools, are hindering us from healthier and safer behavior models, and are violating human rights. We are reinforcing a vicious cycle, this cycle. And is there a way to break this vicious cycle? Yes. On July 29, 2022, WHO published a new resource for designing public health responses that address HIV, viral hepatitis, and sexually transmitted infections among key populations, including drug users, MSM, transsexual, sex workers, and prisoners. The guideline pointed out critical enablers that breached any further possibility. The critical enablers said, number one, remove punitive laws, practices, and policies. Number two, reduce stigma and discrimination. Number three, empower the community. Number four, address violence. And these fundamental principles apply to every different population. We cannot eliminate any problem using machine guns. The problems have been always there, deeply rooted, breeding whatever we seed. So the last mile is never the least mile to go. So it is, in fact, the first mile to go. In search of solutions, I have been attending seminars, reading books, collecting people's experiences. I found that without a sterilizing vaccine and an easy cure, the goal of elimination is not feasible. It becomes a slogan that fosters cruelty. The emphasis on life quality and human rights, the fourth 90, on the contrary, do invite people to health retention programs. I found wisdom in a book that says, the opposite of love is isolation. The opposite of hate is connection. I found this was true. We will move on. Let me tell you what else I found. I found there are still good connections in the real world, connecting everyone's stories. These connections brought me into other people's lives. These connections brought me into the difficulties they encountered. These connections brought me into their deepest needs as well as their deepest dreams. And these artful connections made us more like each other than we are different. Tell you what, I found a lovely NGO building these connections secretly. It is called Taiwan HIV Story.
I am honored to share my perspective on the recovery process for AIDS patients in Taiwan. What we envision for a friendly community. We imagined a harmonious society where everyone, regardless of their sexual orientation or social status, could live with dignity and respect. Films like House of Himiko, a Japanese movie about an LGBT nursing home, and Scars on Memory, a Taiwanese documentary by Mickey Chen about the gay sauna and displaced populations, portray this vision of well-being under the rainbow. Truth is capitalism and social exclusion. Despite our aspirations, reality paints a different picture. Infectious diseases, big pharmaceutical companies, and right-wing ideologies contribute to the exclusion of the most vulnerable populations. They are left behind in the name of profit. Mental health and psychosocial issues are often overlooked. The Foucault model, which emphasizes criminalization and medicalization, consolidates systemic inequities. Biomedical addiction models are used to mask social medicalization and politicization. Books I teach medical students about profiteering highlight these issues. Policing kills. The harsh reality is that policing affects our communities just as much as it did for ACT UP New York. My loser friend is a prime example. Constantly rejected by job interviews in our fast-paced, over-competitive city, he spirals into depression, quarrels with his mom, takes drugs in suicidal attempts, and ends up in our psychiatric ward repeatedly. We face significant challenges in maintaining medical privacy in this war on drugs era. Patients are forced to screen for HIV at work, and some get fired because their employers are already aware of their status. Many are rejected by dentists and insurance companies. Trust in the government is eroding. We do not want mandated recovery programs and rehab centers that promote social control and digital monitoring reminiscent of Xinjiang. These measures exacerbate persecutory delusions that cannot be solely explained by substance use or psychiatric diseases. Cultural violence, lack of freedom of speech, and learned helplessness contribute to unhealthy coping strategies and overdoses. The last-mile key populations often run away from their homes, jobs, society, and the police system, making it impossible for them to access our services. Key population community members should be included in decision-making processes, harm reduction efforts, and discussions about STI and sex industry issues. To break this vicious cycle, we must truly empower communities. Empowering communities is essential to breaking this cycle. Organizations like ACT UP fought against medical profiteering, and other NGOs strive to counter right-wing funding and colonization. With the expiry of HIV oral antiviral medication patents, we must switch to affordable generics instead of scaling up long-acting treatments. Generic oral TLD at $45 per year, with a high resistance barrier, can be sold through vending machines for PrEP, PEP, or regular treatment, along with other on-demand products like HIV and STI self-testing tools, naloxone, and sterile syringes. This drug price is 100 times cheaper than brand names. The money saved can be invested in human rights, social infrastructure, and curative and vaccine research. It should be spent on initiatives that truly benefit patients. Key population guidelines for HIV, STI, and hepatitis provide clear directions. We should develop demedicalized health services using point-of-care and self-testing tools, community pharmacies, and key population community teams. The foundation of these services must be built on human rights, including the decriminalization of drugs and other subcultures. There are far more than biomedical models. Communities are experts in their own right. Let them lead. Put people first. Thank you.